Legend of Exorcism. Chapter 73. The Cruel Truth. Hung Jun fell silent. Chongming waited for a moment, but when he didn't hear anything more, he asked solemnly, "Why did they die?" "In your heart, you actually understand it the most clearly," Hung Jun said quietly. "To separate the seed of Mara from my dad's body, you had him go to the human realm, find a woman, and give birth to me, isn't that right?" When he got to this point, Hung Jun's voice was trembling. Chongming's eyes immediately widened. He had originally thought that Hung Jun would tell him about the specifics of what had happened, but he never thought that he would actually end up digging up such an old case from so many years ago. "Who told you?" Chongming's voice changed. "Isn't that right?" Hung Jun said, panting. "Answer me." "Impudent." Chongming swiftly stood up. That powerful oppressive force immediately had Hung Jun taking a step back. If that was not the case, then how could there be you today? Chongming's reaction confirmed Hung Jun's guess, and all of the hesitance and fear that he had felt on this journey finally erupted all at once in this moment. He had no way to suppress the rage in his heart, and he roared, "You caused my mother's death. What am I? What am I? Answer me." "You are Kong Xian's son," Chongming replied coldly. "I am nothing more than a sacrificial offering," Hung Jun said, his voice trembling, his body shaking as he stepped back. "I am nothing more than a sacrificial offering that you all created to separate the devil seed." "Correct," Chongming said slowly as he watched Hung Jun. "If your dad had not died, you would not be standing in front of me now." In that instant, the world spun around Hung Jun, and his breathing grew labored. Chongming studied his expression and continued, "The first day that Qing Xiang brought you to Yejin Palace, I did not originally want to keep you alive." Hung Jun. "But guilt weighed down my heart," Chongming said. "Kong Xian died because of me, and it was because of that that I took you in." "No, no," Hung Jun stared fixedly at Chongming. "Is this not what you are thinking in your heart?" Chongming asked, coldly removed. "Is this not the reality that you are afraid of? Is it not exactly the voice echoing from your own heart? What is your mother?" "I do not care." "And what are you?" "I could care even less. When that trash Kong Xian, to protect you, disregarded his own life, that was what I truly cared about. The ones who killed your mother were me, Qing Xiang, and your dad himself." Chongming suddenly flew into a great rage. "But it was exactly because of that that you could see this world. You should be thanking us, but you actually dare to accuse me now." A chill ran along Hung Jun's spine, going all the way up to his scalp. "Then why did you adopt me?" Hung Jun felt that his own soul was shattering bit by bit under Chongming's words, as he mercilessly gave voice to those internal thoughts that Hung Jun himself did not dare to think. With every sentence, he sliced open the truth, as if all of Hung Jun's memories of Yejin Palace in the past were being torn apart in front of his eyes. Chongming let out a cold laugh. "Xiaoyu vainly tried to swallow you so that he could turn into a devil dragon and conquer the divine land, so how could I let him fulfill his desire?" "No," Hung Jun said, his voice trembling. "It's not like this." Hung Jun took another half step back, but Chongming said coldly, "Where do you think you are going? I have already given you a choice, and today, it was you yourself who chose to return." Just as Hung Jun was about to leave, countless beams of orange-red light suddenly burst forth from Chongming's hands, wrapping around his body. Hung Jun roared angrily, "Let go of me." Chongming used the bright light to trap Hung Jun, wrapping it around his neck, dragging him to the corner of the palace. His eyes glowed with a golden light, and his voice grew richer, as if it was a voice from the heavens echoing across the earth. "I should have long since gotten rid of you, to prevent no end of trouble." Those words were the last sentence that Hung Jun heard before he lost consciousness. In an instant, boundless darkness pounced on him, enveloping him. He was curled up in a corner of the main hall, while Chongming quietly studied him. It wasn't until the early morning sun rose that Chongming turned his head, only to see that amongst the peaks, a great peng clad in golden light was flying towards him. In the early morning, the mountains were shrouded in clouds, and Li Jinglong woke to the sound of bird calls pleasing to the ear. He stumbled sleepily out of the room, only to see the mist and clouds coiling gently as it billowed into Yejin Palace. Outside, the parasol tree grove had already turned into a sea of fog, and the scene was extremely majestic to behold. Chongming walked out from within the forest of parasol trees. Behind him, hundreds of birds followed the phoenix, letting out non-stop calls. "Mortal, Zhen has something to say to you." Chongming's voice came to him from a distance. Li Jinglong hurried to go back inside, change his clothes, and come back out. He felt a wave of nervousness that stemmed from seemingly nothing, and not because Chongming's identity was special, but only because he was Hung Jun's adoptive father. The mist cleared, and Chongming and Qing Xiang stood in the forest. A long time ago, Qing Xiang had passed on to Li Jinglong a set of bare-handed forms, which he had remembered, and he hurried to cup his hands and bow to the two of them in greeting. When he lifted his gaze to observe Chongming, he saw that the other's face seemed to set in anger. Qing Xiang's expression also did not bode well. Upon not seeing Hung Jun, Li Jinglong knew that there was probably trouble ahead. As expected, when Chongming studied Li Jinglong, he said darkly, "The heart lamp was never supposed to be given to you." Upon hearing those words, Li Jinglong froze for a moment, yet his brain moved even faster than Chongming's as he replied, "That child of the Chen family is not yet grown, so how will he be able to activate the heart lamp? Since you all need the power of the heart lamp to exorcise the devil qi in Hung Jun's body, then what harm is there in having me hold onto it temporarily and activate it?" Chongming hadn't thought that he would actually have no way to respond to the sentence of Li Jinglong's. The atmosphere immediately grew very awkward. "One day, when I die," Li Jinglong said slowly, looking to Qing Xiang, "naturally, I will return it." Qing Xiang looked towards Chongming, but Chongming replied coldly, "No need, you can head down the mountain right now. From now on, you will have no more connections to Yejin Palace at all." Li Jinglong. Upon not seeing Hung Jun coming forth, Li Jinglong thought to himself, "Not good." He had not expected that Chongming would directly voice such an order to expel his guest. "Where is Hung Jun?" Li Jinglong immediately asked. "I want to see him, let me see him once, then I'll go. Do not refuse the easy way in favor of punishment." Chongming's words were tinged with a little more menace. "This is not your human realms, Chang'an, and you are nothing more than a single ant in millions. Just because you bear a garbage sword picked up from your hobby of collecting scraps, you dare to speak to Zhen in such an insolent way." Just as he was speaking, Li Jinglong didn't even see Chongming move, but his aura burst out from him, and blazing heat billowed out. Li Jinglong backed away subconsciously, automatically igniting the heart lamp, while his right hand reached out behind him. With a weng, the sword of wisdom seemed to respond, and it burst through the window, shooting towards him. It landed in his hand just as the flames also reached him. Li Jinglong lifted the sword to block, but the heat came rushing forth, slamming into the sword of wisdom like a meteor. There was a huge boom, but before Li Jinglong had the chance to make a move, the long sword had already left his hand. Under this powerful attack, the heart lamp was like a paper lantern as it burned to ash. "Stay your hand!" Qing Xiang immediately shouted. Li Jinglong's chest hurt with a stifled pain as he fell backwards solidly into the corridor. For a time, he looked bedraggled beyond belief as he struggled to rise. Chongming silently watched Li Jinglong. After taking that blow, Li Jinglong felt that their cultivation levels were as different from his as the clouds were from the mud. There was almost no chance of him being able to return a blow. "Get off the mountain," Chongming said. "Hung Jun has already informed me of exactly what happened, and he will no longer see you." Li Jinglong raised his head, but Chongming had already passed by his side and left the garden. Qing Xiang watched Li Jinglong. After a long while, he let out a sigh. "Go ba," Qing Xiang said. "Go back to Chang'an, and keep being an exorcist." Li Jinglong lifted his head, numbly watching Qing Xiang, only to see him raise a hand. With a weng, light sprung up around Li Jinglong's body, before with a flash of the white light, the scenery around him instantly changed. Li Jinglong reappeared at the foot of the mountains almost 100 li away. The sword of wisdom revolved as it plummeted from the sky, pinning itself into the ground with a ding. Li Jinglong. In Yejin Palace, Chongming sat silently on the throne. Qing Xiang walked into the main hall, watching Chongming. "Things did not have to go this way at first," Qing Xiang said. "They did not have to go this way?" Chongming asked darkly. "Back then, it was you who did your best to send him down the mountain, because to undo the trouble, one must find the one who caused it. As of today, the devil Qi has not been dealt with, instead, it has grown even denser. It's even more capable of coming to Yejin Palace, in that body filled with resentment." Qing Xiang replied, "You can hide it from him for a time, but you cannot hide it from him forever." Chongming's anger seemed to be unquenchable. "And who was it who dared to promise me that that mortal would be able to suppress the devil seed in his body? He wasn't even able to take a single blow from me. What a piece of trash! Who would think that you'd use the sacred fire of the phoenix to test him?" Qing Xiang shouted, also growing angry. "The heart lamp is a brilliant light that releases living beings from their suffering. It is not a magic that can be used for slaughter. Do you still not understand?" Chongming grew even more enraged, and he roared, "I will not let him take even a half step from Yejin Palace ever again." Qing Xiang took a step forward, not giving him even a single bit of leeway. He said darkly, "That Black Jiao has split its own hunpo to create substitutes for the devil seed, and who knows how many are in the human realm right now. You think that by keeping Hung Jun protected in Yejin Palace, Mara will not revive? Whether Mara revives or not, what does that have to do with me?" Chongming asked. He rose and walked down the steps to the throne, heading right for Qing Xiang. He stood basically nose to nose with him, watching him coldly. "Dage, you want to fight?" Qing Xiang studied Chongming, before he suddenly chuckled. "We haven't fought for many years, you want to go outside to fight?" Chongming finally got rid of this desire, and he fiercely pushed Qing Xiang aside. Qing Xiang took a few steps back, and Chongming continued, "The crime that I have committed because of a single mistake, how much more will I have to repent to redeem myself? When Mara revives, that will be the day I perish. That should be enough to repay you all, and to repay Kongxian." Qing Xiang was silent for a long while. But just as he was about to leave, Chongming, who had been staring at the mountain range outside the hall, said slowly, "Seal his memories, and let him stay at Yejin Palace as he was before. In the coming days, after I pass, this place will be handed to him. As of today, I am only worried that in the future, when he sits alone in this hall, he will be too lonely on his own." "I'll do my best," Qing Xiang replied, sighing. "The devil seed is ferocious, and it's experienced so many things after heading down the mountain. I'm afraid it may not be able to be sealed. Chongming, then, let him continue to hate me." Hung Jun woke at the summit of the lone peak across thousands of Qing, only to find that he had been placed in a pavilion. To his side, there was water and food. Since the pavilion stood at the summit of the tall peak, it was only about a jang wide. On his left ankle, there was clasped a very thin chain that clanked as he moved. His pentacolor sacred light and his immortal slaying throwing knives had been confiscated, and when he tried out a spell to create fire, pain spread along his back. He pulled a cup to him, pouring the water inside onto the ground. He then turned his head to look. Right in the middle of his bare back, a phoenix sigil had been drawn using gold powder mixed with cinnabar. Every time he tried to call upon the magic in his meridians, the phoenix sigil would light up, suppressing his magic. He reached out to wipe it off, but that incantation was drawn right at the center. No matter how he reached with his hands, he could not reach that part. He struggled to one of the pillars in the pavilion, and he turned to rub his back against it, to the point that it burned with pain. But even in the end, the sigil did not come off. Dad, Hung Jun was at a loss for what to do, and he subconsciously wanted to shout for Chongming to save him, only to realize that the person who had locked him up here was also Chongming. He dragged the chain along as he stared out past the lone peak. In the distance, Yaojin Palace had become a small black dot, while the lower half of the mountains had been obscured by the sea of clouds. The summit that trapped him here was like a stone pillar. Compared to Yaojin Palace, the two places were almost the same height, and even without the chain binding him, he would not be able to escape. If he forced it and leapt down, that would only pulverize every bone in his body. Li Jinglong dash. Hung Jun shouted towards Yaojin Palace. There was no response. Hung Jun could only slump down bonelessly, still leaning against the pillar. At twilight, Li Jinglong washed his face by the creek, before staring at his reflection in the water. A cold, gloomy rain had begun to fall in the Taihang Mountains. There was still a lot of snow gathered on the ground. He drank some water, rested for a moment, and ate some dried rations to replenish his energy, before lifting his head to make out those mountains that seemed to look nearly identical. He carried the sword of wisdom on his back, walking on foot on the narrow path through the bramble thickets. He noticed that there was a bird on a tree which was turning its head, observing its surroundings, and its black eyes turned to him. The bird hopped over the tree branch, leaping onto another tree. A few more birds flapped their wings and took flight, sinking into the depths of the forest. Li Jinglong sighed. Upon identifying the road that he and Hung Jun had taken when they came, he headed towards the cliffs in the canyon. Chongming stood by the pool in Yaojin Palace. Together with Qing Xiang, they watched the contents of the water, their heads lowered. He is merely like this, Chongming said coldly, before turning to leave. Qing Xiang turned and transformed into the golden-winged great pen and spread his wings as he flew into the air. With a circle, he sped to the west. In the pavilion on the peak, Hung Jun heard the cry of a bird, and he swiftly raised his head, shouting, Qing Xiang. Qing Xiang dash. The golden-winged great pen flew over. Its size was a good 3 jong tall, and with its wings spread, they could instantly encircle the entire pavilion. A wild wind blew, and Hung Jun kept tugging at that chain, afraid that the golden-winged great pen would not see it as he shouted, I'm over here. With a flash of light, the body of the great pen shrank, turning into Qing Xiang's large form. When he landed, he stepped onto the seats by the railings of the pavilion. Bending over and squatting down, he watched Hung Jun without turning his gaze away. That gaze seemed to hold pity in it. Take me away from here. Hung Jun shouted. Qing Xiang. Qing Xiang didn't respond. Hung Jun knew that he must have already learned of the causes and effects from Chongming, and his heart immediately chilled as he said, Chongming has already told you. Qing Xiang lowered his head, nodded, and reached a hand out to gently stroke Hung Jun's face, before cupping his palm against his cheek. You suffered in the human realm ba? Qing Xiang's voice was unnaturally calm. Hung Jun watched Qing Xiang dumbly, before he shook his head. Qing Xiang sat on the railings, his legs spread, continuing to lower his head to watch him as he had before. Hung Jun's back was still leaning against the opposite pillar, and he let out a tired sigh. Just like what you told me before, the human realm is very good, Hung Jun replied. But as for where it is good, that is different from what you said. The human realm is very good, Qing Xiang replied, probably because of the people there. In comparison, Yaojin Palace is like a cage, and right now you should understand why I never want to return here. Hung Jun still remembered what Li Jinglong had asked him last night, whether he was willing to go back to Chang'an with him, and how he had replied without even thinking about it, "I will." And Hung Jun nodded. As they spoke, Qing Xiang sighed again, and he said, "Chongming has been alone for too long, do not hate him for it." Hung Jun asked in response, "Where's Li Jinglong?" "He left," Qing Xiang said. "We told him not to wait for you any longer, and to go back to Chang'an." Hung Jun immediately lifted his gaze, watching Qing Xiang. Qing Xiang continued, "Do you regret going to the human realm?" Hung Jun replied, "I do not regret it." The wind blew, scattering the clouds, and the setting sun cast its rays from the west. The sea of clouds was pushed aside, revealing the vastness of the divine land. Qing Xiang said quietly, "Hung Jun, you actually understand more so than anyone else, isn't that right? When I was small, did Li Jinglong and I know each other?" Hung Jun asked in response. Qing Xiang watched him. This exchange of questions and answers did not even have to be voiced, because they both knew the answers. A long time later, Qing Xiang's expression grew grim, and he nodded, his eyes filled with pity. On this journey, Hung Jun had obtained almost all the answers that he wanted to know, and each and every answer had completely shattered all of his hopes. "Qing Xiang," Hung Jun asked quietly. He, on the other hand, was very calm. "Back in the beginning, the one who sealed my memories was you, isn't that right? Li Jinglong, Direnja, the dilapidated exorcism department. In that nightmare of his home being destroyed and his family being killed, the one that had rushed there the fastest was indeed Qing Xiang." Hung Jun still had a vague impression that Qing Xiang had put a single knee to the ground, studying his eyes. He had said a sentence of something and his palm had pressed over, and with a flash of white light, Hung Jun had forgotten that pain he had experienced. "That's correct," Qing Xiang said, no longer hiding it from him. "Your and Li Jinglong's memories were both sealed by me, because I did not want you to continue to live on bearing that pain. The heart lamp was given to me by the Kun God, who said that to undo the trouble, one must find the one who caused it. It was because of that that I had a vague premonition that perhaps, when you returned to Chang'an, you would meet Li Jinglong. But I had never expected that through a series of coincidences, the heart lamp would end up in his body." Hung Jun added, "Nor did you think that your seal would vanish." "That was an accident," Qing Xiang replied, after a moment of thought. "The seal was an incantation, a poem that I taught you to read when you were small. After smelling the Lihun pollen, this line that was most important to you was forgotten by you, and your memories of the past seemed to slowly rise to the surface." Hung Jun was completely silent as he stared into Qing Xiang's eyes, his own eyes reddening. Qing Xiang continued, "Forget it ba, and stay in Yaojin Palace. As long as you live in that world, there is only pain." Hung Jun immediately held his breath for a moment. Qing Xiang lifted his left palm, which glowed with a warm, gentle, white light. "Wait," Hung Jun's voice trembled. "I still have one more thing to ask you, Qing Xiang." Qing Xiang watched Hung Jun, whose entire body was trembling as he said, "Qing Xiang, you would not have waited until the last moment to come and save me, why did you not come a little earlier? Did you know a long time ago about all of this, and all you wanted, was to wait for me to die at their hands, then bring my dad, back to Yaojin Palace?" Qing Xiang turned his head, avoiding Hung Jun's gaze. Tears flowed down his face, and he choked out, "Hung Jun. I'm sorry. Hung Jun." In that instant, when Hung Jun received that last answer, the furious grief in his heart burst out like a flood. But Qing Xiang's left hand had already suddenly reached out, and he pressed up against his eyes. "The living are passing travelers, the dead return to their eternal homes. The heavens and earth are but an inn, for all our grief, we inevitably return to dust, seal." In a blink of an eye, that segment of memory flashed through Hung Jun's mind. "What does that mean?" little Hung Jun asked. "This is a devil sealing incantation," Qing Xiang explained. Memorize it, you must not forget it. On the jade surface of the cliff of stars, Qing Xiang laid relaxed on that smooth inclined slope. Little Hung Jun laid on Qing Xiang's body, and together they looked up towards the brilliant vault of stars. When the resentment in this world does not dissipate, and surpasses all of the limits that the divine and earth veins can tolerate, it spreads into the human realm, accumulates as grievances, and becomes a devil, Qing Xiang said, just so. Then what is resentment? Little Hung Jun asked. Qing Xiang, regrets. Little Hung Jun, what regrets? What gives rise to thousands and millions of regrets is nothing more than life and death, Qing Xiang explained in a murmur. Whether human or Yao, the Hunpo of all beings are nothing more than passing travelers rushing through this vast world. Death by old age or by illness, the 7 emotions and 6 passions, all of this is nothing more than scenery along the way. After breaking away from life and death, no more regrets exist, and there are no more heart devils. If heart devils are not born, Mara cannot appear. Have you memorized this? I've memorized it, Little Hung Jun replied, as if to himself, before he turned and slumped onto Qing Xiang's chest, closing his eyes and going to sleep. At the summit of the lone peak, a pair of wings that covered the sky opened up from Qing Xiang's back, spreading across the heavens and earth with a hwala. Around his body, white light and energy revolved rapidly, and Hung Jun let out loud shouts of pain. Let go of me dash. Hung Jun did not stop struggling, but Qing Xiang's left palm shone with bright light. The white light spread along his forehead towards his bare upper body, his waist, and circulated rapidly through his entire body. Hung Jun lifted his hands, tightly grabbing Qing Xiang's wrist. You all are lying to me dash. Hung Jun's voice grew hoarse and strange, his eyes spewing black qi. Instantly, a pair of black wings burst forth from his back. Under the onslaught of that black qi, Qing Xiang was actually unable to hold out. He roared angrily, seal, for me. Just as Hung Jun was about to break through Qing Xiang's devil sealing incantation, that phoenix sigil on his back suddenly let off a bright light. In the main hall of Yejin Palace, Chongming suddenly opened his eyes. In a flash, in the pavilion on that lone peak, the pillars collapsed under the onslaught of the devil qi in Qing Xiang and Hung Jun's bodies. Tiles flew everywhere. The devil qi kept climbing up Qing Xiang's forearm, steadily reaching for his throat. The devil qi acted like brambles, twining and crossing, causing golden blood to spurt forth from all over Qing Xiang's body. Hung Jun's eyes burned with blazing black fire, and with a strange voice he roared angrily, I'm going to kill you dash. In that instant, a wildfire tornado rose behind him, and the phoenix appeared from within that golden flame. With a long cry, Chongming spread open his phoenix wings that covered the world, shouting, break. He then used his arms to command his feathers of flame, bringing them together in the center, and thousands of flame feathers stuck to Hung Jun's body. They turned him into a ball of fire, forcing all of the devil qi back into his body. With a huge boom, the pavilion on the ridge collapsed. Hung Jun fell unconscious again, toppling over. Qing Xiang kept panting for breath, and Chongming knelt, one knee to the ground, one hand pressed against the sigils on Hung Jun's back. He said solemnly, the devil seed has never been so uncontrollable before. He cannot be allowed to go back to the human realm. End chapter. Legend of Exorcism. Chapter 74. Thousands of steep peaks. In the dark night, Li Jinglong walked out of the bushes without a sound, the sword of wisdom on his back, hunched over, racing like a cheetah across the creek. In the distance, red clouds burst out around the lone summit, accompanied by indistinct thunder. Li Jinglong borrowed the cover of the night, looking first towards the eastern summit. That was the place where Hung Jun had brought him to climb last time, and also the mountain range where Yejin Palace was located. The sun set, and night fell over the Taihang Mountains. The birds all returned to their nest, and the world seemed to take on a different form, as countless monsters with bared fangs and unsheathed claws hid within the darkness. Li Jinglong held his breath, listening intently, distinguishing between the different rustles that came to him on the wind, constantly approaching the mountain range. The grappling hook that Hung Jun had used was still with Li Jinglong. When he had climbed up to Yaojin Palace, he had held onto it. In the dark night, he turned his head to look towards the thousands of tall mountains, before taking a deep breath. This was coincidentally a night that was filled with clouds, so there shouldn't be any birds that would notice him. All right, move out. He swung the grappling hook in a circle a few times, and based on memory alone, he tossed it up high. There was a light sound as it hooked onto a tree, and Li Jinglong swiftly climbed up. In front of the main hall of Yaojin Palace. He's absorbed quite a bit of worldly resentment. Qing Xiang laid tiredly on the steps, while Chongming stood behind him, pouring the medicinal wine from up high onto the wounds across his entire body. Qing Xiang bore the pain and looked towards Chongming. If you had listened to me, Chongming said coldly, and had not sent him down the mountain in the first place, today would not have happened. Qing Xiang smiled bitterly. Chongming tossed the wine jar onto the steps, where it shattered into pieces. How much longer do we have to wait? Chongming asked once more. Until tomorrow at daybreak, Qing Xiang replied. I will seal him once more, and this time, it should hold. Chongming walked to the side of the bed in the hall, picking up Hung Jun with both arms, hugging him to his front as he turned and walked towards the main hall. Hung Jun's sleeping posture was very calm, as if nothing had happened at all. Chongming hugged him, passing through the main hall, coming to a stop in front of that parasol tree outside the hall, gently placing him under the tree. He leaned against the parasol tree, solemnly looking towards the sky. Hung Jun lay to one side, the chain around his ankle wrapped around Chongming's wrist. The moon shone brightly, and the sea of clouds billowed with a silver light. Among the thousands of peaks of the Taihang Mountains, the lone summit stood like a lone island in the middle of the ocean. Dad, what are you looking at? The sun. It hasn't risen yet though. Soon, Chongming replied solemnly. That time, little Hung Jun had sat by Chongming's side, watching the sky to the east slowly grow fish-belly white. During the night, he had had a dream, and upon waking, went searching for Chongming everywhere, and he found himself on the platform. In his memories, Chongming always sat there quietly. If he wasn't sleeping, he was staring off into the distance, lost in his thoughts. He had also stroked the scar and tattoo on Chongming's body and asked him where it had come from, only for Chongming to reply that he had been bitten by a snake. Dad, what are you looking at? Little Hung Jun ran past the platform, sticking out a head from behind the pillar, asking him curiously. The moon. Dad, can I go to the human realm? No. Qing Xiang said he's willing to take me. That was the time that little Hung Jun saw Chongming grow the most infuriated. He had only asked a single sentence, yet Chongming and Qing Xiang had had a huge fight. In the end, Qing Xiang flew away, leaving behind little Hung Jun, still waiting there dumbly. Afterwards, Chongming had actually been so cruel as to not speak to him at all, and only after 3 whole months had little Hung Jun's apologies garnered a response. From then on, he had never dared to bring up the human realm in front of Chongming again, and he could only wait hungrily for Qing Xiang's rare visits. Thankfully, after that, Chongming slowly stopped getting enraged, and he actually said to him, fledgling birds leaving the nest is an unquestionable truth of the world, but in the matters of the world, it is impossible to reconcile the two sides. If you want to go to the human realm, you can, but if you go, then don't come back. Dad, look, I saved a fish. Throw it out? What kind of random trash is this? Dad. I'll take good care of it. Hung Jun had grown quite a bit older, and the youth's visage looked more and more like Kong Xian's. The Carpiao hid behind him, trembling with fear, saying, Benefactor, I think it's better to let it be. Don't be afraid, Hung Jun said, turning his head to address the Carpiao. My dad only looks fierce. Chongming. Will you choose your red dust, or will you choose me? Dad, I can't bear to lose you. If I had to choose. But Chongming had already lifted his index and middle fingers. A small flame burst out from his fingertips, and he swiped it across the long feather attached to his belt. With a roar of flame, the belt split into two. Chongming turned and leaned towards the precipice, and as he launched his body into the air, he exploded with blazing fire that blanketed the sky, suddenly lighting up the dark of the night. Spreading his wings, he turned into a fiery, blazing phoenix that shed light in all directions. Its cry echoed through the range of mountains, before with a gentle flap of its wings, not lingering any longer, it flew towards the horizon. Dad! Hung Jun almost rushed over the edge of the cliff, only to be hugged tightly by Li Jinglong. Li Jinglong hugged him tightly, looking towards Chongming flying into the distance. That night, Hung Jun draped a hand over the edge of the bed, and Li Jinglong held his hand, falling into a deep sleep. In his dream, the shadows of the parasol tree leaves in the exorcism department danced, slicing the brilliant blazing sunlight into points of light like falling meteors, one by one drifting down. Zenchi. Zenchi, what are you doing? Zenchi? What's this? Kong Hung Jun. Don't tug at me when we're on the street. In the night so dark that if he stretched his hand out, he couldn't see his fingers, icy rain pattered down from above Li Jinglong's head. He held a wooden plank between his teeth as he slowly clambered up the patch of steep rock face. He didn't dare to light the heart lamp, afraid that would complicate matters, and based on his memory alone, he sought out spots on the cliff to put his limbs. Why is it that what you say never matches what you mean? That's not very good. It's not that my words don't match up with my intentions, I really don't want to eat it. Li Jinglong raised his head and looked towards the top of the cliff. Darkness enshrouded the world, seemingly with no end. He bit down on the wooden plank, panting without stopping. His feet almost slipped as he was gathering up the rope attached to the grappling hook, and he pressed tiredly against the cliff, letting out a long breath. The sunlight was brilliant as he waved his arm to shake Hung Jun off. He wanted to smack his head, but he saw that Hung Jun's face was filled with confusion, his mouth filled with pastries, and he was holding out a pastry for him to eat. Li Jinglong was both aggravated and amused. He wanted to beat him up, but he also wanted to press him up against the wall of the alley and lower his head to kiss the corners of his mouth. Li Jinglong rested for a second, before he kicked upwards off the rock, stepping onto the ledge, continuing to climb upwards. Hung Jun laid by the side of the pool, and a gentle breeze blew by, filling the pond with ripples. His sleeping visage was tender and calm, and the moonlight blanketed his body with crystalline light, like the warm waters of the pool. It's even festering. The two of them were pressed skin to skin as Li Jinglong meticulously applied medicine to his ear. His eyes were filled with pain, even though Hung Jun was still smiling happily, his head tilted to the side, pillowed on the bank of the pool. His eyes flicked back and forth as he studied Li Jinglong, his handsome face reddening. After it forms a scab on its own, then it'll be good. Li Jinglong's forehead was furrowed deeply as he looked at Hung Jun, who only smiled back at him. The world was completely dark, and Li Jinglong's right hand would not stop shaking. The shaking grew fiercer and fiercer, and he clamped his left hand down tightly over his right, resting for a bit on a bit of the protruding cliff. Zenchi, I'll go with you ba. Don't tug. This is a government office. What do you think you're doing? Li Jinglong shook off Hung Jun, walking out of the government office with rapid strides. He stood behind the wall, his face and ears burning red, torn between crying and laughing. He let out a curse, straightened his martial robe, and hurriedly left towards the judiciary department. There were still 3 more shishin of this journey. Li Jinglong estimated. That day, when the two of them had been climbing together, they had slowed down, but if he pushed himself, he could still go a little faster. He had to reach Yaojin Palace before daylight. He tossed out the grappling hook, hooked it on something up high, and climbed up the cliff face. When he got up higher, there was already nowhere to stand, so he stabbed that wooden plank into a crevice in the cliff face, one hand grabbing onto it so that he dangled there. He looked down, only to see a swathe of pitch black. It was impossible to determine how far he had climbed, and when he looked up, he couldn't see the fingers of his outstretched hands. He didn't dare to be arrogant, so he could only use his right hand to inject the power of the heart lamp into that rope. He then tossed the rope over his head, and it flew up high. The hook lit up the entirety of the cliff face, like a weak lamp. Like the light outside the way station in Saiwai, on that snowy, windy night. You did that on purpose. Hung Jun's entire face was flaming red. He hurried to find a cloth, pulling the drawstring of his pants away from his body. Holding it in to this degree, were you fantasizing about getting married? Li Jinglong sat to one side, chuckling as he propped his feet up. I wasn't thinking of getting married. The cold wind whistled by, and Hung Jun was curled up in his blankets, head pillowed on his arm, lying on one side as he hugged him. One leg had even wrapped around him, and Li Jinglong's heart beat wildly as he turned his head to look at his sleeping face, before slowly lowering his head down. Their lips were less than half a kun apart when Hung Jun moved a slight bit, his head crooking to one side, and Li Jinglong immediately shut his eyes, evening his breaths. Hung Jun, Li Jinglong swung left and right with great effort as he grabbed the rope, drawing out arcs against the cliff face. He then tensed and sprung to a spot not too far away and grabbed that rock that was protruding outwards, his entire body dangling from that cliff. In that instant, Li Jinglong's heart seemed to also be hanging in the air, his life hanging from a single thread. He shut his eyes, and the wild wind rushed past his ears. In the storm-swept graveyard, the flames of Mara erupted from all over Hung Jun's body, whirling around him wildly like flying daggers. Against the onslaught of those daggers of devil flames, Li Jinglong pulled out his sword and rushed over. Stop! He spread open his arms, fiercely wrapping him in a hug. Li Jinglong's chest glowed with bright light, and the black flames all over Hung Jun's body suddenly burst and dissipated, like snow melting under bright sunlight, or wisps of clouds before a strong wind. The devil flames morphed into comets that whistled backwards. With a burst of strength, Li Jinglong climbed onto the rock. That day, he had rested right here and had dodged the ice and snow that fell from above his head. He was almost there. It was right before his eyes. The instant that the chunks of ice had come crashing down, he had unconsciously turned and hugged Hung Jun tightly. As the blocks collapsed, Hung Jun's heart had beat wildly, as the two of them stood there pressed tightly together, the bridges of their noses pressed up against each other. When the sound had lessened, he looked towards Hung Jun with mirth. He could feel that the two of them had both had reactions. His two hands pressed against the cliff face as he looked mischievously at Hung Jun, only wishing that he could lower his head and land a kiss on his lips. Li Jinglong rested for a moment, only to find that he was already amongst the clouds, so he once again bit down on the plank, and with a rush of energy, once again tossed out the rope. His hands went up and pulled it in, leaping towards the crevice on the other end, once again pinning the plank into it. In that instant, he broke through the billowing dark clouds, and he suddenly saw the light. Rays of silver light shone all around, above the cloud layer was a world of brilliant light. The bright moon rises over the Tianshan range, parting the vast sea of clouds. In the sky to the west, the moon's light sparkled, blanketing the sea of clouds. Under the light of that moon, Li Jinglong turned his head back disbelievingly, only to see that the peaks of the Taihang Mountains stood like lone islands rising out of the sea, undulating one after the other. A handsome moon hung in the sky, and everything was silent. There was only that gentle breeze under the layer of clouds, blowing gently towards the horizon. With a very slight sound, the grappling hook caught onto the railings of the platform, and Hung Jun woke. He opened his eyes. The moonlight shone from distantly in the east, and under the shadow of the parasol tree, Chongming was still soundly asleep. Hung Jun lowered his head to look at the chain on his ankle, before then looking towards the end of the platform. Li Jinglong stowed away the grappling hook, his right hand trembling non-stop. He turned and looked towards Hung Jun, by the pool. Hung Jun. Hung Jun widened his eyes, but Li Jinglong began to smile. He panted quietly for breath, earnestly watching him, doing his best not to make any sound. He began to walk towards him, slowly, tiredly, but then approached him rapidly, bent over, opened his arms, and pulled Hung Jun into a tight embrace. The sky was turning fish-belly white, but Hung Jun could not stop sobbing, clinging onto Li Jinglong for dear life. Li Jinglong lowered his head, pressing a kiss to his hair. Shh, Li Jinglong shushed him by his ear. He then looked towards the sound asleep Chongming, before he waved at Hung Jun, pointing at the thin chain on his ankle. Hung Jun shook his head, then lifted it to look at Li Jinglong. With one knee on the ground, Li Jinglong furrowed his brows, thinking of some way to deal with it, but Hung Jun silently hugged his waist. Li Jinglong wanted to pluck off Hung Jun's arms that were wrapped around him so that he could go find something to break this chain, but Hung Jun didn't let go. Let go, Li Jinglong whispered quietly in his ear. Hung Jun kept hugging him just like this, without uttering a single word. In that moment, he finally grew aware of the joy and sorrow, the sorrow and rage, the multitude of mixed emotions that he had felt before. All sorts of emotions, all because of his desire to rely and protect each other, and worrying over what he would win and lose. He didn't know where this fate had come from, or what cause had birthed this, but it was everywhere, like soft feathers that covered the world, gently landing on the most fragile part of his heart. Let go, Hung Jun, Li Jinglong whispered, gently patting him. He was almost mad with worry, but still he lowered his body to put his mouth by his ear. We climbed up here with such difficulty, how did you manage to anger him? Hung Jun let go, his eyes filled with tears as he looked at Li Jinglong. Li Jinglong looked into his eyes, and suddenly had an urge to pull him back into his embrace. But this really was not the time to revel in feelings, in this situation and this place. He made a gesture, indicating that Hung Jun wait here while he himself hunched over and passed by the pool, peering towards the main hall, searching for some sharp implement to pry open that chain. Hung Jun gestured to Li Jinglong, making the shape of his own throwing knives, but Li Jinglong only waved his hand and pointed at himself, meaning that Hung Jun could count on him. Just as he was about to rise, he suddenly came face to face with Qing Xiang, who had wobbled out of the main hall. Qing Xiang's chest was covered with wounds, and he smelled of medicinal wine. Instantly, the atmosphere grew tense. Hung Jun turned to look at Chongming, still sleeping soundly under the tree, before then looking at Qing Xiang, now anxious beyond compare. Li Jinglong reached back and pulled the sword of wisdom off his back. His right hand shook, but he forced it to be still as he stared down Qing Xiang. Qing Xiang's face was to him, and he suddenly mouthed something. Hung Jun couldn't see, but Li Jinglong read his lips and understood. Promise me that even if you die, you must turn into a corpse ghost that fell in battle to protect him. Li Jinglong understood, and he put his sword back on his back, nodding his head extremely slowly. In the next instant, Qing Xiang waved his left hand, and a black feather speckled with golden flecks spiraled out, instantly snapping the chain binding Hung Jun. Right after, his left hand sprung out, and with a gentle flick, Li Jinglong felt that a wave of huge power rushed towards them, and his entire body was sent flying out past the platform. Upon seeing this, Hung Jun immediately leapt over to catch Li Jinglong, but Li Jinglong grabbed Hung Jun's wrist in a vice-like grip, pulling him into his embrace, hugging him tightly. Hung Jun. The feather of the golden-winged great peng shot towards Li Jinglong, suddenly turning into wings of light that brought the two of them flying away from the platform. With another slight flick of his finger, 5 lights shot like meteors through the darkness right before dawn. With one arm hugging Hung Jun, Li Jinglong caught the lights with his other. Those were the pentacolor sacred light and the 4 throwing knives. Hung Jun hugged Li Jinglong, who, with a flip, parted the sea of clouds with a flap of the wings of light. With the rising sun at their backs, they flew towards the end of the mountains. The clouds sped by them swiftly, as a loud boom came from Yejin Palace in the distance. The two of them suddenly turned as an earth-shaking sound came to them. A ball of blazing flame and a ball of golden cloud, entangled with each other, rushed out of the sea of clouds, sending up a powerful wind that swept the layers of haze away. "It's Chongming," Hung Jun said. "Chongming's awake." Li Jinglong didn't respond. He merely tightened his grip around Hung Jun, who couldn't resist turning his head to watch, but Li Jinglong used his forearm to cover his eyes. The two of them flew faster and faster, whistling through the Slot Canyon, passing through the valley outside the Taihang Mountains, before rolling along on the ground, falling onto the grass. Hung Jun stumbled to his feet and clambered up high. Li Jinglong chased after him, shouting, "Hung Jun!" Hung Jun stood halfway up the mountain, numbly looking towards Yejin Palace in the distance. Chongming seemed to be enraged beyond compare, and the phoenix and the golden-winged great pen turned into glowing clouds that clashed time and again, crashing into the lone summit that had imprisoned him, sending it crashing down. When the peak crumbled, clouds of dust washed over it. Hung Jun turned again to look at Li Jinglong, who watched Hung Jun guiltily. "I'm sorry, I didn't expect that in the end." Hung Jun leapt forward and hugged him tightly. End chapter.